Pranakasha livestream.
Hey folks, it's Matt at Pranakasha Productions, and today we are talking with Gary Noland, a fellow composer and member of the Dylan Society of Composers that I'm also a member of. And so Gary, I'm trying to remember how we met. I think it was on Facebook or something like that, or?
Yes, it was on Facebook.
Okay.
I think you responded to a piece of mine for cello and piano that I posted.
Right, that's it. And then I sent you a message, and it was I just looked at your website, and can I play? Your website sent me to this piece, which is called the Grand Rag Brilliant.
Yes.
Can I play a bit of this, and then we can talk about it?
Sure.
So I'm just gonna play it right off of my phone. Okay, so the thing that initially attracted me to your music is I think the thing you posted was just a very neo-romantic, beautiful piece. I think it was it a trio or was it a sonata?
Cello and sonata. I just called it a fantasy.
Okay, right.
It's 13 minutes.
And I was just really taken because it was just so beautiful, and it was kind of right up my alley because I like to compose in romantic style too. But then, I find it very interesting that this is the thing. Like when you go to your website, this is your premiere audio sample, right? That a person hits. That's what it sent me to.
Yeah, I haven't updated my website in quite a while. I have about 150 more pieces to put in.
So. Right, and you have a really wide variety of styles, actually. And so it's interesting that you did a ragtime, which is just like, you might say it's like the most unacademic thing you would put out there as your opening salvo, you know? But then you throw in this kind of little crazy comments within it, which I realized later is a thing that's really kind of dear to your style. So, like, could you comment on that?
You mean in the music itself?
Yeah, you can start to hear like there's this random elements that start coming into it, and then what I came to notice, and also you're also a visual artist, and you can see that in your visual art, is there's like, on one hand you're like, you could say that you're an extreme traditionalist by writing something like that, but then, which is funny because at the time, writing something like that would almost be considered radical because the norm in like the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s of a composer was to write something very avant-garde. And if you wrote something that was all traditional, like the professors wouldn't even consider it. They'd be like, well, can you please write something original? That was their whole attitude, right?
I ran into this problem quite a bit.
Right. Which is why, I mean, that's probably how you ended up in the Dylan Society, is because that became a refuge for composers who like to write in pre-established styles, or Joseph Dylan Ford called it historicism, like historicist composers.
Yes.
But then, of course, you also love to be a radical, and you like to write, then throw in some really crazy off the wall stuff. You know, so can you tell us all about that?
Well, I can tell you about my history as a composer. I did start out as what you might call a traditionalist. I was innocent before I went to college. All I wanted to do was learn how to write in the style of Bach and Mozart, and Beethoven and Brahms. I never even dreamed that when I went to UC Berkeley, is where I ended up, that I would be subjected to what they subjected me to.
Yep.
And the first 2 years were okay because you're supposed to learn that stuff in your training. And then suddenly, when I took independent studies with I'd already exhausted most of the composition courses, so I took independent studies with Andrew Embry, and he was very hard on me.
What year was this?
Hard. That would have been 1977, I believe.
Okay. The year that Star Wars came out, by the way.
Oh, was it? Okay. He was harsh, yes, and I didn't understand it. And I thought, did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong? I mean, what is this? But he essentially told me that if you wrote in historicist styles, the music was invalid, had no validity whatsoever. And
Right.
And then I got into a discussion with another faculty member there who's still around, I believe. And maybe I shouldn't mention his name since he is still around. He's quite
Why
old.
not?
Why not? Richard Felciano.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't care anymore. I mean, I'll say what I want. I can't stand his music, frankly. But
All right.
I do respect Andrew.
Free
Embry.
speech.
Yeah.
To hell with censorship.
Yeah. Well, and I can prove that I can't stand his music. Before I even tell you about the conversation, years later, when I was at the Boston Conservatory for a couple of years, one of the singers there brought in a recording. She said, "Gary, I want you to listen to this horrible music. I want to know what you think of this." She didn't tell me who the composer was. And I listened. I said, "I agree. That is just absolutely some of the worst music I ever heard." And it was Richard Felciano. So, I wasn't influenced by the fact that he, that he basically condemned me. My dislike for his music was genuine. Yeah. So, but in any case, I posed the question to him: what if some composer came along and wrote the B flat minor Mass, and let's say it was in the same style as the B minor Mass, more or less, and every bit as good.
You're talking about the famous Bach B minor Mass, right?
Yes. Okay. And he said, no, there would be no point to that. It would be completely invalid. And after he said that, I knew that it felt like my days were numbered, let's put it that way. I did make it through the program, but I knew I couldn't get along with the senior faculty there.
You're talking about the undergraduate program?
Yes, at UC Berkeley, yes. Okay. Anyway, I think things have thawed out a bit since then, although I think there's always some new intolerance that's going to prevail. Right. No, I'm not sure what it is nowadays. Maybe it's just this sort of anything goes philosophy. It's destructive. I mean, because no composers seem to be making any headway through all of this.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. Well, I have some strong opinions about all that too. So, I mean, like if it were me and somebody told me, well, this is invalid, I'm like, well, according to who? And then the next question, then that opens up the whole discussion of when you write music, who is your audience? Yeah. Because for sure, if you had some musicians play it and it's good, they're going to like it because that's the kind of music they're trained to play. So they're not going to think it's invalid, right?
The real test is if your music still gets heard when you're gone. Even when you're alive, if you get second or third performances, that's a good.
That's a win. Yeah.
And I look at composers just through the 20th century. When I went to school, we were told that certain composers were important. No one plays them anymore. And then there were other composers we were told were insignificant. Now everyone plays them. The best example. Korngold.
Or Sibelius. All the theoreticians hated Sibelius. They thought this music was stupid, and he doesn't even know music theory, blah, blah, blah. All the critics slammed him. And now we're still playing his music. I'm playing it, and I'm playing an upcoming concert, Sibelius First Symphony.
I wrote a paper on a piano sonata of Korngold's for an analysis class back in the early part of the graduate program I was in at Harvard. And Donald Martino, he tolerated it. I mean, I guess he liked my paper, but the faculty there were wondering, why would I care about Korngold? And even Earl Kim said, well, his music has no significance. I mean, those were his words.
Yeah.
Everyone's playing Korngold these days.
Yeah. I played in an orchestra where we played before, which was, I guess, 2 years ago now. Oh, shoot. I said the C word. Darn it. I have to edit that out. If I say that word, YouTube will flag this video. So, okay. So I'm gonna do an edit right now. So a couple of years ago, before the C thing happened and we had to wear a mask and stuff, I played an orchestra that did play a piece by Korngold. So there you go. And then of course Heifetz, I championed his violin concerto.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So wasn't he also a movie composer as well?
Well, he was. He had no choice but to move to the States. I think just around the time of the Anschluss in Austria, he got out. He was lucky to get out. And he was already known in Hollywood. I'm not sure it was to his taste to write film music, but he had to do that for a living, as did other composers like Ernst Toch, who didn't fare quite as well as Korngold, although later on he did win a Pulitzer for his Fifth Symphony. But he went through a state of terrible depression, during the war. And I think that's probably the story for a lot of the composers who had to immigrate to the States.
Right.
They were uprooted from their homeland. Korngold returned to Germany. He tried to visit Richard Strauss, and that was when Strauss was very ill, which was after the war. And Strauss's wife said, "Oh, I'm sorry, he's very ill. You can't see him." And this was disappointing because Strauss supported Korngold in the early years because he was a wunderkind. And actually, Korngold's known for his film music and for his operas, probably more than for his early chamber music. It was the early chamber works that turned me on to him.
Oh, interesting.
His piano trio that he composed when he was only 12. Opus 1, fabulous piece by any standards. And the violin sonata he wrote when he was about 14. Amazing work.
Wow.
If you don't know them,
I don't know either of them. That's okay. I'll have to check them out.
I would assume everyone knows those pieces, but evidently not. I mean, they're not played that often, but they're getting known. I mean, they're played more and more these days. The early chamber works. There's a sextet. There are 3-string quartets. There's a piano quintet. There's a piece for, I believe, it's piano quartet and with piano left hand that was written for Wittgenstein.
Okay.
Pianist.
What those early ones that he wrote in his early teens? What style were they in?
Very much in a late romantic, very lush harmonic language that it doesn't sound like Mahler quite. It doesn't sound like Strauss, but it's right in there. He's as good as Strauss and as good as Mahler, but he has his own original style in that very lush, lush palette of harmony that somehow he had it all down by the time he was 12. He was writing incredibly sophisticated music.
Wow.
I know of no other composer historically who's done that. Not even Mozart, not even Mendelssohn. Korngold's early works are the most sophisticated pieces by a 12-year-old I've ever seen.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in Octava Chamber Orchestra. We're about to do a concert in a couple of weeks where we're doing one of Mendelssohn's string symphonies. We're doing String Symphony number 8. So he was about the same age when he wrote him. And they're really clever, but not super radical though. So, and the harmonic language isn't going to be like how you described, but neat pieces too, just because he had such great instincts. So, wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, we could go out, we could talk all about all this stuff, but I kind of want to dig into your music a little. So you how did you, then what did you do after your graduate or your undergraduate? Then what did you do?
I had to go into the real world, which I didn't like. I worked at various odd jobs. I worked as a waiter. then I actually couldn't work that job because that was on the UC Berkeley campus, and they wanted to give those jobs to students. So they laid me off. So I found another job bussing dishes, which I hated. I tried playing piano, I think, in a couple of restaurants, but I wasn't quite good enough. And those were depressing. There was about a year and a half. It was very depressing. Finally, I decided, well, I guess I have to go to graduate school. So I in the last minute, I applied to the only places that were still accepting students. That was the San Francisco Conservatory and the Boston Conservatory. I got into both, but I preferred the Boston Conservatory. So I was there for 2 years, and I'd done all my work except the thesis. But in the meantime, I had applied to Harvard, and I got in. So I was in a bit of a dilemma because I was still trying to finish my master's degree, and put me under a lot of stress. Consequently,
So hold on, I want to talk about your when you were doing your thing at Boston. Yeah. So did you knuckle under and write stuff that the professors wanted to hear, or did you still just stick to your guns?
I always stuck to my guns.
Okay.
But they were more tolerant actually at the conservatory. They actually were quite encouraging.
Oh.
They didn't really meddle with my psyche the way they did at Berkeley. And I think already in the early 1980s, things were beginning to thaw out just a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, those professors, they were 10 years older than I was. And they were, well, I guess they were modernists. Okay. I did like them pretty much. I enjoyed the conservatory environment. It was very musical. There were recitals you could go to all the time for free.
Okay.
And it was a good period musically for me.
So during that time, were you still writing, was it all neo-romantic, or were you already starting to throw in your sort of satire and sardonic random stuff that you like to throw in now?
Nothing was random. Everything was very...
It had some sense. It had a sense to it, but it was definitely coming in. Maybe I shouldn't say random. I should say it's just more kind of shocking. The thing that strikes me is that your music is so well crafted. Like, you obviously know how to write just a beautiful romantic piece, right? But then now you tend to also now throw in this commentary that's just basically, to me, it's like you're just commenting on the insanity of the world and of humanity, you know?
I mean, I'm not sure I'm the one to say, you know, what I'm doing. I mean, that's an interpretation, and you're probably right. I did write at that time. I put together a set of 20 piano pieces.
Okay.
They weren't organized like preludes, and I wasn't academic. They were in different styles. Many of them in what you might call a post-romantic style. Okay. The concluding piece was called Burlesque. That was very much in the style of Richard Strauss, I would say.
Okay.
And I was influenced at that time by Dochnani and maybe Korngold a little bit, Chopin. But also there was a piece that was influenced by Webern. Okay. So the fourth piece in the set is this more or less a 12-tone piece.
Okay.
Style of Webern. And then I threw in a song. I called them 20 piano pieces, but there was a song thrown in for soprano and piano.
Would you call it an art song or a pop song, or?
No, it was actually a Lied in German, a setting of Murica's Verborgenheit, which Hugo Wolf also set. So it's that was very much in a sort of post-Mahler style.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to think it's really my own style. I mean, you know, what I do doesn't sound exactly like what other people do. And then there was even a Baroque, a two-part invention, a la Bach.
Okay.
But it culminated I think it was the 18th piece I entitled Collage, which was, it required dancers. And I took this segment off of a recording, which I think I pre-recorded it using a turntable and distorting it on the turntable. And then it was this warped sounding dance. I just took it off a record. Actually, it wasn't my music, but I just used it. And it's a pretty shocking piece after you hear all the other stuff. And actually, I will say this: the original score calls for nude dancers, but that didn't happen.
You and Stravinsky.
Actually, Donald Martino he was one of my professors. He has a piece called Augenmusik, which calls for a nude female percussionist, which he lamented never got performed. The score,
wow.
you find the score in libraries. It is available.
Interesting. Okay, so would you say, so this was basically you took a pre-existing piece and you kind of did a spinmeister thing to it. So were you like trying to be like John Cage or something like that at that moment, or?
I wasn't thinking of John Cage. I was just, I was being myself.
Okay.
I've always been a bit rebellious, I suppose. I don't want to. I don't want to do what other people do, obviously. And it always angered me when people would suggest that about some of my music. Or it didn't anger me. I mean, I would be flattered if people said, "Oh, that reminds me of certain composer." That's flattering, but I think it was Schoenberg who said, "To know a composer, you can't know a composer by one piece. You have to know their entire oeuvre."
Right.
And Schoenberg, of course, his early works are some of the most beautiful lyrical pieces.
Well, yeah, and I mean one of his most famous works still is Verkleidernacht, which is really quite late romantic.
And his early songs.
Yeah.
There's a recording of Glenn Gould, which I love. He does all of the songs, and the early ones, Opus 1, I think it's Opus 3, Opus 6, maybe it is, and maybe some others. Yeah, actually, if you listen to it, you can hear the progression of his style, and you realize by listening to the early works through the late works that the changes are quite gradual. And he remained essentially romantic, just with a little edgier sounding towards his later years, you might say.
Yeah, but then he had embraced that philosophy of trying to completely abandon any idea of tonal center.
But you have to be an expert in tonality to be an expert in the negation of tonality.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, he knew how to do it. I think there are other composers who don't, because if you look at early works, and the early works are often revealing, early works by Stockhausen or by Xenakis or by Milton Babbitt, I think they reveal that these were not necessarily great masters of the tonal language, as evidenced by their early compositions. And so when you listen to some of their later works, you kind of get the sense that tonality was not really their bag, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that gets into a large subject. I mean, I used to get in huge arguments with composers on. Did you ever know about Compose forums? You ever heard of that?
I don't think so.
It was an internet site where a lot of composers hung out and argued about stuff. And yeah. So that one piece, I'm going to call it the Spinmeister piece. So was that the first time you did something that you would consider like really sort of avant-garde for you?
Well, I had assignments at Berkeley that I didn't really want to do because my purpose in going to school was to learn. I thought they would teach me how to master the language and
the craft.
It didn't happen. There was very little of that. The only thing that was useful was a one-year course in counterpoint. The orchestration class was horrible. You can't even imagine how bad that was. But so there was one assignment that I remember in a second-year harmony class. I passed out of first-year harmony. So it was actually
okay. I'm going to stop you for a sec. So that's strange that a class in orchestration would really be lacking, because you would think that if you're going to write music that's got what I call lots of special effects and all this kind of stuff in it, which was sort of the style then, that you would think they would be really into exploring all these different orchestrational things you could do to create these effects.
No, I mean that was probably the case. Yeah, and I was still in my limited sound world. I wanted to learn how to write like Mozart,
Mm-hmm.
and that didn't happen in the orchestration class. I mean, we were looking at things that, for my taste at the time, were too modern, too avant-garde.
Okay.
It wasn't useful for me because I hadn't yet mastered the craft of basic orchestration, and that's all I wanted really.
Okay.
So
Did you at least like have a copy of Rimsky-Korsakov's treatise on orchestration or anything like that?
I don't think we used that in that
Okay.
class. It's so long ago. I mean, we're talking almost 45 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, those books are helpful, but I think the thing that is the most useful is really just to listen to a lot of music and study scores and just basically try to discover what they're doing.
Yes, of course.
You know, and yeah. Okay, sorry to interrupt you. So I kind of derailed you there.
I forgot what the thread was.
We were talking. I think I was trying to say, when you were in your undergrad, you were just wanting to learn the craft.
I was naive. I was extremely naive, and I started music very late.
Okay.
We didn't have a piano till I was 11, and I didn't even have a good teacher till I was 16. My first teachers were not encouraging. My very first piano lesson, I went to the teacher at age 11. I said, I want to learn the Goldberg variations. And she said, oh, well, you'll have to practice scales for the next 15 years before you can even touch them. And that was so.
Well, that sucks. I mean, at least she could have taught you the aria.
She could have she could have at least told me where I could get the score. I asked her where could I get the score. She wouldn't tell me. I was just a naive 11-year-old. I didn't know that there was a store in town where you could buy that stuff.
So I'm gonna ask, okay, so how was it that you managed to get yourself into Berkeley then?
Well, I traveled to Europe for a couple of years when I was 13 to 15. My mother took us there actually to escape the turbulence in Berkeley. She found a job in Switzerland, and we ended up traveling all over Europe. When I returned, a friend of mine who he had played some piano, although he wasn't very advanced, but in those 2 years he got much more advanced, and I was flabbergasted when I saw what he could do at the piano. He is a jazz musician.
Okay.
And he was already playing, impressively at jazz at the piano and classical too. I thought, how did he learn all this stuff in 2 years? So I was intrigued, and he told me, well, you can study music theory. He was studying music theory at high school, and I'd never heard of music theory. So I was intrigued by that. So I begged this teacher to let me into his music theory class. And
at the high school level?
High school that I went to. Yeah. I didn't go actually to Berkeley High. I ended up going to Piedmont High School. My grandparents lived in Piedmont, which is a town, if you know it, it's in the center of Oakland. And
I've been to Oakland, so I probably have been through it then.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
So I worked very hard. I worked very, very hard, and I was obsessed. And so from age 15, I studied intensively, and it was very hard because my family did not encourage me at all. And my mother used to lock the piano.
Oh. Yeah, that's not very encouraging.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't at all. So
was anyone else in your family a musician?
No. Well, I mean, historically, yes. My grandmother, they immigrated from Germany. My grandmother told me that her brother was a gifted musician. She told me stories that he could actually go to concerts and then return home and play back everything by ear that he had heard. And as a 6-year-old, that impressed me when she told me these stories.
Interesting. That's kind of like the story about Mozart.
Well, he ended up, he had a family. He had 2 young kids. He was married to a Catholic. I just learned, I knew that, I mean, the speculation was that they had perished in the war. But it wasn't until 30 years ago that I went to the International Red Cross to find out about him. He'd been deported to Auschwitz in 1943. But there was always a mystery about the other members of his family. And then just recently, the daughter of my first cousin did the research and found out that they also were sent to Auschwitz. So
Wow.
now we know. I mean, there's closure finally. That whole family unit was just wiped out.
Wow.
But my mother's family left early enough to avoid that.
So how was it then, if nobody in your family, in your immediate family, was a musician, that you guys had a piano?
I think it's the European culture. They brought with them the old world culture. I was essentially raised by my mother and her parents. Her mother is a relic from the 19th century. She was born the year that Brahms died.
Okay.
So I was brought up in this German speaking. My German's not good at all. Don't get me wrong. I hardly speak it, but they just brought with them the old world culture. So it was in the blood.
Okay. So they had a piano because it was sort of like having a TV or a radio in your house then.
No, I didn't get the piano till I was 11. It was only because I showed this interest in music. Oh,
and your parents bought a piano?
My mother, yeah.
Oh,
my father separated, so my father wasn't a part of the picture. But it was because of expressed interest in music.
So she bought the piano, but then she proceeded to lock it.
Well, the one good thing she did is she nursed me to classical music. I remember it suddenly hit me how beautiful the music was. Just one night when I was listening to Beethoven's Violin Concerto, I think I was only 3 years old.
Oh, wow.
And it just hit me. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard.
At 3?
About 3, yes. And then a few years later, on my 6th birthday, the greatest gift she ever gave me was Glenn Gould's recording of the Goldbergs.
Yeah, there we go.
And I became obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
I became obsessed with that. I also went through, I listened to popular music for a couple of years from age 10 to age 12. I knew every single hit on the radio at that time. That's the late 1960s. I loved all that stuff at the time. And
so the Beatles,
yeah.
And everything, all that stuff.
All that stuff.
Pink Floyd even.
That was, I think, after my time.
Oh, really? Okay.
I don't remember them in the late 60s. That might be the early 70s.
Yeah. I think they're around, but not that popular yet. Wow. Okay.
But it lost its allure for me
right.
later when I became more immersed in the world of classical music.
So when you were 3 years old, what about the Beethoven Violin Concerto was it that grabbed you?
I think it's just the melody, the harmony.
So was it just like was it da 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 dum da 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 dum?
Yeah, it was magic.
Magic. It has the best. The thing about that piece is, it's the orchestra part is what's so good about it. When the violin finally comes in, it's just sort of noodling around, at least in my opinion. Mm. But the orchestra introduction is so beautiful, Yeah. Especially with the timpani playing a melodic part and everything. Yeah.
I didn't think in those terms as a kid. It was just, I think I acquired perhaps a good sense of structure from my early listening. Certainly those, the goal, nothing could be structurally more sound. Nothing is better architecture than the Goldberg variations.
Okay.
So architecture is important to me.
Interestingly enough, I really like the Goldberg variations, but I'm fascinated with the aria. Maybe because that's the only part of it that I ever learned.
Uh-huh.
But I just think the aria is so beautiful, especially if you really try to ornament it well. Mm-hmm. There's so much you can do with it.
Yeah, I've played that piece quite a few times. The thing I've always been I've never gotten it. I'm not a scholar, but maybe you can enlighten me. Is that actually written by Johann Gottlieb von Goldberg, or did Bach craft it from a tune of Goldberg's? This is something I've never been certain about.
Well, I always thought it was just called the Goldberg Variations because he commissioned it And the whole point of the piece was to help him fall asleep at night. Did you ever hear that?
I might have.
Yeah. So I always assumed it was all original Bach. But I mean, with Bach, you never know. I mean, it's entirely possible that he could have taken a popular melody and then created that aria based on it.
With Goldberg, another recording I listened to at an early age were some Bach trio sonatas, which I loved. And it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I heard one of those on the radio. And they said, this piece used to be attributed to J.S. Bach, but it's actually by Johann Gottlieb von Goldberg. And it was one of those trios that I listened to thinking it was Bach. So Goldberg, I haven't heard too much of his music, but I get the impression that what little there is indicates that he was a very fine composer in his own right. And I believe he studied with Bach.
Oh.
So, there's a palpable influence.
Okay, then maybe you're right and I'm wrong. Maybe it was based on a melody created by Goldberg.
This I don't know. Maybe we have to ask Christoph Wolff. He's this Bach scholar.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, we just diverged right off the bat, so I kind of derailed you. Like we backtracked into your undergrad, and then I derailed you. So maybe we should try to get back into your master's degree.
Well, yes. I mean, we're talking about those 20 piano pieces, which I'm planning to publish in a third volume of my piano music, maybe this year if I have the time. I still think they're good pieces, and you can even hear one or two of them on online. Perform quite well, actually. So yeah, that was a wild set. I mean, it was. I think I was doing something that no one had done before, which was to write serious classical music and to throw in these wrenches.
Yeah.
Throw in a singer, throw in possible new dancers. I mean, it's not what you would expect, right? And that, not to mention the constant shift of styles.
Mm-hmm.
Or syntaxes, maybe.
So like I tried to say that maybe you're trying to make a commentary on the craziness of life, and then you said, well, maybe that might be what I'm doing. I'm not really sure. So it's just you're just flying by the seat of your pants when you get an idea and follow it, or what's your creative process?
I think it's changed with the changes in technology. I mean, I used to slog it out at the piano. I mean, I'd sit at the piano for hours, listening very closely to what I was composing and trying things out, constantly erasing things. That was more of a struggle. I think my craft now is more sure-footed. I mean, I'm more confident than I was, and I mean, now I feel that what I'm doing is, of course it's a lot of work, but it's a lazier kind of work because I do things that do have real randomness in them.
Okay.
And it relies really on improvisation.
Okay. And do you still write it all down?
The things that you might have heard recently, no, those are just what I call comprovisations. I play them, I tweak them, I add tracks. Some of them have as many as 20 or 30 tracks, multi-layered. So they're quite complex. I like the results I get. But the thing is, I think ultimately writing music down is more fulfilling. But I'm following my muse right now because what I get from this are these polished performances and nice recordings. In order to get the same from a written piece, I have to hire a musician, and the performance might not turn out the way I like. I mean, there are all kinds of things that can go wrong. If it goes right, then it's the most wonderful thing in the world. So that's part of it. I'm just I'm doing what's economically feasible, I suppose. It's
right, and of course nowadays we have all these tools at our disposal where you can do. I mean, you don't have to go to a multi-track recording studio to do all this. You can do it yourself on your computer.
Yes.
So
And I feel guilty when I do it because I'm thinking, well, if I'm doing it, then probably a zillion other people are doing it. And I don't know enough about what my colleagues are doing to know if what they do sounds similar to what I'm doing. I'm told that a lot of people tell me they've never heard anything like my stuff, but I don't know. I mean, I don't, there might be stuff out there that I'm not aware of.
Well, it's so interesting because, like, when you write a piece, I don't think you sit there and like have a list of I got to do these things so that I'm going to sound like Gary Noland and really, promote the Gary Noland style of composition, right? You just do it, right? But then when I hear your stuff, I'm like, oh, that's Gary.
Well, the thing
there.
Is, there's always this pressure. There's this pressure to find your voice. I thought, well, we all have our voices. We don't have to worry about that.
Right.
What you need is craft.
Right. Exactly.
That's what you have to find is the craft.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everyone has a voice. That's already given to us, but we're not born with a musical craft, and that's right. The mistake in the teaching that I received.
The bad teachers. I mean, there are good teachers now that believe this and teach.
These were established composers. A lot of these were Pulitzer Prize winning composers that I studied. So.
Of course, I mean, just because you're a successful composer doesn't mean you're a successful teacher.
That's true.
Two different skills. Yeah. So, yeah. The other thing that I always use to debunk that whole idea is like, they would say, well, I mean, if you ever want to get famous and you ever want your music to be known, you have to you got to do something new. And I finally say, you know what? That's crap. You know what that is? That's just marketing. In fact, if I want to really become known, I can just write halfway decent music and then put all my energy into promoting myself, and then my music will last longer and be more well known because I put so much into the marketing of it. And there are composers out there, in my opinion, that's why they are that well known, is because they're good at promoting themselves, and their music's decent, but it's not like head and shoulders above anybody else. It's just that they were really good at promoting it, or they had good connections, or whatever it was.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many composers I come across who I think are first-rate composers who are not well known. I mean, they're sort of on the periphery of being known, but they're not in the canon, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
it's a pretty short list.
Yeah.
Like for the 20th century, I mean, it's probably like 5 or 10 classical composers that you can rattle off at the most. So you never really know. But again, what I finally did, at least for me, I was like, you know what, forget this. I'm not going to play this game. The game I'm going to play is I'm going to write music that I like and that the musicians that I associate with like and want to play. And if we can do stuff that we like to play, then I've succeeded. So, and again, that's the whole craft thing. A lot of what I try to do is just learn how to write music that was idiomatic, and surprisingly, I had a lot of trouble writing stuff that was good for strings, even though I'm a string player. It took me a long time before I finally felt like I can finally write good interesting string parts, Well,
there's also, it raises the question about the complexity of the music. Obviously, a composer like Brian Ferneyhough, if that's how you pronounce his name, he writes scores that are almost incomprehensible, and yet he gets performed. And so there's that side of it. Not everyone's going to play his music, but there are specialists who do, and who spend maybe a year or longer learning one piece of his. And and then on the other hand, from a practical point of view, one should write music that enough people can play if one wants to get enough performances, right? So there's always that conflict that I have.
Yeah.
As a composer, I have written some very complex scores, But I found that probably the simpler things are the more popular,
Yeah.
and the ones that people tend to want to play more.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's sort of, you get into this thing of what your goal is when you're writing a piece,
No.
you know. I don't know. I mean, like, at least for me now, it's more like, a lot of times what'll happen is I'll get an idea, and then I'll just follow it. There's a quote that Mozart had where he said he would get an idea for a melody or a fragment, and then he'd just take it for a walk,
Mm-hmm.
and they're having that kind of attitude where every piece that you write is kind of an exploration. And then, of course, you've developed your craft, and you have innate within what you've done, once you've composed a lot and sort of developed some chops, let's say, then you can take a somewhat mundane idea a lot of times and really work with it, and suddenly it becomes something really good and really interesting that just spins itself out,
I've told some of my composition students who get too obsessed with the initial idea. I tell them, don't worry about that. Just take it and develop it.
Yeah.
I mean, ideas are a dime a dozen, really. I think it was Bach who said he tripped over his ideas every morning. And I mean, ideas.
Well, of course, I mean, how many classical pieces start out bum bum ba, or some version of 1-3-5, right? And it's like, even with that small combination, you can start with that, and there's an almost infinite number of pieces that you can create out of that initial idea right there.
It's interesting to do a study of fugue subjects, Bach fugue subjects from the well-tempered clavier. All of them are brilliant subjects for fugues, and they're so simple, most of them. I mean,
yeah,
and yet I think it is actually quite difficult to write something at that level. To actually find that level of simplicity is really quite hard. And a lot of composers or musicians don't realize that the music that sounds complex, or let's say complicated, complicated is one thing, because complicated is not necessarily complex. In order for something to be complex, you have to have also the element of simplicity, which is another element of complexity.
Okay. So, I think what you're getting at is that, I think what you mean by complex is it has many layers to it, and yet there's a common thread that makes it all make sense, right? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, perhaps I'm talking about structure and harmonic scheming too. I mean, just sometimes you'll have a harmony over here, and it has to be in the right place so that the harmony over here makes sense in relation to the harmony over here.
Right.
And that's something that I think a lot of composers don't get. And I think when Schoenberg told Cage that he'd run into a brick wall every time he tried to study harmony, I think that's probably what he meant, because I don't think Cage understood structure in the same sense.
Well,
Schoenberg certainly did. Schoenberg was he understood structure very well.
I have a friend of mine who is now in his 80s, and he got a doctorate from the UW, and he's another huge fan of Bach. And he had a thesis or an idea that what he would say, and he would show me examples of where Bach would just randomly plunk down a chord that sounded horribly dissonant and made no sense, but then he would justify it by the next couple of chords after it, and then suddenly it made sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of a similar idea, what you're saying.
I've done this exercise where I even ask some of my students to try it. Play, let's say you limit yourself to 4 notes, any dissonance, let's say, without replicating any of the notes, just take 4 notes and then name a key and find your way into that key, and it's something I can do, mm-hmm. But it takes some practice to learn how to do that. But I mean, I think, and I think I learned this from George Rochberg, that any dissonance can segue into consonance.
Right, easily. And I've also learned that when you're improvising, like one of the things I like to do, I like playing at church these days because I'll like play along with the hymns and improvise a descant on the spot and stuff, and or play like some sort of modern Christian rock song and then make solos up on the spot and all that kind of stuff. And it's the same thing again. Like it's fine to hit dissonant notes as long as they're not a half step out of whack from the key usually. But then you can just sit on it. And again, in the end, it seems like rhythm is actually more important than harmony. Like, you know what I mean? It's just when you hit a note, just how long you stay on it or how is the thing that matters, not the actual note, you know?
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah. Which they never taught us in music theory. They were always so hung up on harmony, you know? Especially when you started to have to write more modern stuff. I mean, I don't even know if there really is a codified theory of rhythm. It's like we're just supposed to sort of, you know, find our way. Like rhythm and rhythmic patterns and I mean, you could make a whole study about the power of repetition, like too. Like what I've discovered, like when I improvise a lot, I've gotten more sophisticated with it. So I try and create a structure to it while I'm improvising, you know, so that I actually improvise, you know, a really quite a piece just off the cuff.
Is this on the piano?
No, violin generally. So while like, you know, I guess it's improvising the solo, it would be more like it, or a descant or something. But what I've discovered, of course, is one thing that works really well is like if you come up with a little fragment while you're noodling around and you like it, if you just repeat it once or twice or three times and then come back to it, you know, 8 bars later or whatever, suddenly you create this illusion of this beautifully architected piece rather than just a little random idea. You know?
I think Robert Levin probably understands that well. Have you ever heard him improvise? Robert Levin, he's a pianist and scholar. He specializes in Mozart and Beethoven.
Okay.
But he can improvise in any style. He's famous for improvising his own cadenzas to Mozart concerti, and even I heard him do it for Beethoven's 4th piano concerto once. And
was it totally improvised, or did he have some ideas worked up ahead of time?
He demonstrated this actually in front of an audience once at the Schnitz in Portland with the Oregon Symphony. He said, "Okay, you can write your themes and leave them in a fishbowl in the lobby," which we did.
Okay.
He actually didn't write anything for him, but he then on the second half he pulled out the fishbowl. He pulled out these melodies or melodic fragments, and he went through some. He said, "Oh, this one looks pretty good. I might keep that one. Oh, this one's illiterate." He found about 3. And he said, "Okay, I have 3 that look compelling. So I'm going to improvise a 3-movement sonata in the style of Mozart based on the themes." And he played the themes for us. And sure enough, he did it. And it sounded like it was a written composition. It was quite
amazing. Well, have you seen that Alma Deutscher? Do you know her? You've heard of her?
Well, I mean,
did you see that famous 60-minute interview where she's like 12 years old and they give her like 4 random notes and she makes a beautiful little piano sonata out of it? Similar type of thing.
See that. Although I think they didn't give her much time to really demonstrate. But yeah, I think I've seen.
So she cheated. If you watch closely, they gave her a B natural. Mm-hmm. And she changed it to a B flat. I don't even think she noticed that she did it.
I'll say this about her improv at that time. It wasn't fabulous. I mean, it was impressive for someone that age.
For a kid that age, yeah,
extremely. I mean, she impresses me, and I think she's great. And she has all my blessings. I hope she makes a fabulous career. And she very smartly now is studying conducting rather than composition because she already is a master of composition. She can do whatever she wants. I know because I can hear it. Oh yeah, she's super talented. The thing is, I mean, if you can write tonal music, you can do anything. Mm-hmm. That is not the other way around.
That's really my thesis exactly. And because when you're writing tonal music, you're writing a language that people understand, right? So you can't get away with anything. I mean, if you write something that clunks, everybody's going to know that it clunked. But the other way around, if you write something really avant-garde, you can hide behind all those special effects, you know? So, of course, this, if I even say that, then I'd spark some giant arguments, which could go on for days with certain people.
Well,
But
I don't dislike Elliott Carter, but I did hear once his second quartet performed. I think it was performed well. It was a good quartet that played it, the New World String Quartet. And as I listened closely, I thought, well, it's all very interesting and all very nice and fine, but I felt like, you could, if it had a spigot, you could just turn it off and it wouldn't make any difference. Okay, I heard enough, turn it off now. And, the structure, you don't hear the structure, there's no, you don't feel there's a plot to speak of.
Yeah, I think what it is, and when we go into this, like, if you accept that music is a language, an emotional language, then there has to be a grammar to it, and there has to be, a language implies that, it somehow evolved, and that there's other creatures out there that understand this same language, right? And then once you have some understanding, then you can convey emotions and images and tell a story with it. Okay, so, but if you're constantly reinventing the language, then how can anybody communicate, So it's got this whole idea that music, and this is actually kind of a old-fashioned idea now, but there was a time when you had to create something absolutely original, otherwise you weren't a true artist. It couldn't be the slightest bit derivative. Otherwise, people would look down their noses at you.
Well, and this was until fairly recently, and that school of thought still prevails in some circles.
And I think that's complete bullshit. Because it's got to evolve from something, otherwise it won't make any sense and no one can relate to it. It's got to come from somewhere.
Well, it's if I told you, okay, you're using in your English words that have been used, like the word and the word the. Those are derivative. You shouldn't use those anymore. You have to
right, exactly. It's ludicrous.
There were, dominant seventh chords were verboten, back in the 70s. When I was a student, you weren't supposed to have anything that even hinted at a tonal center.
Well, you couldn't go in dominant 7 and then do a 1 after it.
Right.
You probably do a dominant 7th and then throw in something unexpected after that chord, as long as it didn't function as a dominant. Yeah. All that stuff. I mean, the thing is, I think it's just an example. I mean, of course, there were some really interesting music resulted out of that, But then again, for that music to have
we got a lot of new vocabulary, which is very useful.
Good.
It's good. Yeah. I mean, I'm happy I have access to all of those ideas. I mean, we all eat off of each other's plates, as I say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way it should be. And it's always been that way.
Yeah.
You can't just, come up with something completely new that, that's not related to anything else, especially when all you have is 12 notes or the notes between 12 notes.
Yeah. Yeah. So many interesting things. Okay. So I also would do you have any of your artwork that you could show us available? It's very interesting.
I can pull something out of the closet if you give me a minute.
Okay.
Have a minute?
Sure.
Just hold on.
We can look at the cats. Some cats on the keyboard that are up to no good. Yes, the kittens, and then it looks like that must be the mother cat that's observing the kittens.
So this is that. I have the backdrop so you won't see what a mess my study is.
We were enjoying the cats.
Yeah.
And what they were doing with the piano.
So I don't know if you can see this. It's fading, going in and out, kind of.
Yeah, because of the darn zoom is, well, actually, it's sort of appropriate to your, I mean, it's kind of cool how it fades in and out.
Yeah, well,
So
let me find another here. This one's in color.
what I can also do is you can send me pictures of those, some of your favorite artwork, and I'll put it up above us.
Okay, later on, you mean? Or
yeah, after the interview, you can send me that, and then when I edit it, I always put like still photographs above our windows because I got some extra screen space. But so we can do that. But so your stuff, again, it's okay. Pertinent to like right now, I've been watching tons of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing because I'm kind of a Johnny Depp fan.
Which I know nothing about. I'm not. I don't follow that. So.
Okay. Well, anyways, his basic thing is he admits that he's kind of weird. He always knew he was weird as a kid and kind of crazy, but that was like the source of all his inspiration. So it's like when I see your artwork, I see a lot of that just kind of raw, mental, subconscious type of imagery just coming through. So what is that? Am I anything close to how that happens?
It's very stream of consciousness, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think the recent music I've done might be best described that way too.
Okay. Well, interestingly enough, I'm actually surprised at talking to you right now how together you present yourself. I thought you were going to be way more out there.
Well, my wife told me I should shave, which I did. If you saw me before, I usually am not as clean shaven as I am right now.
Okay, so this isn't the real Gary Noland. This is like the cleaned up rated G version or something. Or something like that.
So no, my life is a very quiet, uneventful life here in a suburb south of Portland, a lovely town called Lake Oswego. You might know. We moved here from Portland about 9 years ago, and it's very peaceful and very boring. And so there's very little distraction, and I can just focus on my work most of the time.
But you have a sense of peace to you. Like, it's really interesting because the impression that I got from you, even like in our Facebook talks and stuff and just listening to your music and stuff like that, I expected to see someone that was a lot more disturbed or like their mind is just more like this kind of. But the way you present yourself is just, there's a lot of peace there, a lot more than I expected.
I might be hiding some of the turbulence that's beneath.
Okay, or maybe it's just a nice part of the day or something, or we're getting into the evening.
Well, let's put it this way. I grew up with a lot of mental anguish, and I've worked out a lot of things. I just turned 65 this month, so I'm an old guy now. So I've mellowed out. Okay. I've learned a lot of things about how to interact with my fellow human beings, which I wasn't so good at when I was younger. My social skills have improved some over the years.
Okay. So it's just mellowed with age.
That could be.
That's neat. But still, you're just as creative as ever now. I mean, because interestingly enough, like your music and your artwork is still pretty out there.
Well, the artwork is from an earlier time. I don't draw anymore. I don't have the time.
Okay.
And I was doing literature also. I wrote, I've written stories, and I finally put out what I call a chamber novel. It's almost what I would call an encyclopedic novel, which is available on Amazon. It's under an anagrammatic version of my name. Instead of Gary Lloyd Noland, it's Dolly Gray Landon.
Okay, why'd you do that?
I just thought my name has not attracted much attention. I thought, well, I'll use another name. Maybe it'll attract more attention. Well, it hasn't. It didn't work. it doesn't sell.
Well,
I don't know
what
how to market it. I have no idea how to market this thing.
well, that's the thing. I mean, we just talked about that. Like, if you just throw a random thing out there and expect people to be able to relate to it, that's kind of, you got a 1 chance in 10 trillion that it's going to connect if it's just purely random and has no relationship to anything that people understand, right? So I would think that Gary Noland would have more pull than the randomly generated pseudonym.
Well, it's not random. It took me a while to come up with the name. And
Okay.
Dolly Gray Landon. I actually have 5 other anagrammatic versions of my name.
Okay.
Lon Gaylord Dylan, which I like.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah, I might use that actually. I'm actually leaning towards bagging Dolly Gray Landon and using Lon Gaylord Dylan. The other ones are there's Orland Doy Blandley and Darnold Ollie Yang and Arnold Day Longley, and I think that's it, unless I'm forgetting one. So there's 6 of them if you include my name.
So this is a case of you using some of your compositional techniques on your name, right?
I suppose.
Okay.
So I've delved into art. That was in my early years. I actually was an aspiring artist. I even thought of becoming a cartoonist when I was, 13, 14 or so.
Okay.
Before I knew that music was what I would pursue.
Mm-hmm.
And I continued to do some drawing, through my high school and through my college years. But music has taken over. For the book, I did some new drawings about a few years ago when I was finishing up the book. So for a period of a few months, I was drawing again. But it's not something I have time to do anymore, unfortunately.
Okay. So it's all music. So how did you... How were you ever able to like create a career with your music where you could support yourself, or did you always have to have some other source of income?
Really cannot support myself with composition. I teach. That's my main source of income.
Okay.
Private teaching, and it's
Teaching piano or
piano.
okay.
I get very few composition students. There are very few people who are really interested in composing. In fact, I have a new student. He came to me wanting to composition. He's quite young, and then it transmogrified into piano lessons. I mean, now he's saying, "I want to learn piano," but I thought you wanted to learn composition.
Well, of course, the two things go hand in hand.
They do.
Yeah.
In fact, my wife teaches piano, and we had a racket going, which I thought worked well, where she would teach piano, and I would take the same student to teach composition, and that turned them into complete musicians.
Great.
They had a much more profound, a deeper sense of music than the ones who only studied piano.
Exactly, because now, like of course, as a composer, when you approach a piece of music like Beethoven or Bach or Brahms or Debussy or whatever, we're thinking, okay, what was going through his mind when he wrote that? What is really going on here? And we're like analyzing it. We're able to like enjoy it as a musician, but we're also analyzing it and trying to figure out what was really going on in their brain. And that it makes it so much more enjoyable. Every piece, even, I mean, I can take any piece, like even like the Pathétique Sonata, which is like a total. It's been played 1,000,000 times and everybody knows it. I can still listen to that piece and find something new in it. Mm-hmm. And I think that just makes it so much more enjoyable to have that perspective.
Yeah. Since we moved here, haven't gotten as many composition students. I had more when I lived in Portland. Mm-hmm. But the thing that we're doing to kind of keep ourselves afloat is, we own some rental properties. So that's our base.
Yep. And, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am totally into that formula too. I have a day job as an IT guy, so that's how I fund all my other pursuits. And I kind of prefer that, because then it makes me free to do all my artistic stuff. And if some of it totally flops or whatever, it doesn't matter, because I'm not like going to starve if it doesn't work out, So it gives me, I have a real sense of freedom because of that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And like there's composers like Borodin, I think, was an insurance salesman.
Or Charles Ives.
Charles Ives, right. And Borodin was something.
Borodin was a doctor. I think was he a medical doctor?
Either a doctor or a chemist, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, even Bach, he made money as an organist, And even Mozart got organ gigs, and he was always trying to find some kind of post to fund his life. So, it seems like it's actually pretty natural for a musician or an artist to have a side gig.
Yeah, I never got called to an academic job interview, even though I have a prestigious degree, PhD,
right.
all that, and have good letters of recommendation. And I look back on that now and realize, well, maybe that's a good thing, because I look at people in that world and they die young and they're stressed out all the time. Yeah. And they don't produce much, because of all the stress of having to sit on committees and having to be accountable, having to justify their position.
Yeah, all the politics.
Actually, the people I studied with at Harvard, Leon Kirshner, Donald Martino, they're good. They're actually good composers, and I don't think Kirshner produced very much while he was teaching. And as soon as he retired, it seems like he had a second childhood of composing again. It seems like, if I'm not mistaken, those may have been some of his best works he wrote after he got retired. Same with Martino. Interestingly, when I studied with Martino, I didn't care for his music much, even the piece that won a Pulitzer. Then I think this was after he passed away in 2005. I came across this recording of late chamber works of his that presumably he wrote after he retired. Mm-hmm. And they're beautiful. I think they're his best music, and they're not known. They're not well known. They're fantastic pieces. They're in that academic, atonal style, but they're so beautifully crafted. They're nice. If you get a chance, listen to some of that. It's that stuff, and performed by first-rate musicians.
Since you're in Oregon, do you happen to know Hal Owen?
I did meet him. In fact, when I first moved to Eugene, he was the first person I met. I lived in Eugene for 12 years.
Okay.
And that was we moved to Eugene because the Bay Area was too expensive. Eugene was like a little Berkeley in some ways.
Yeah.
So we lived there for 12 years. My wife ended up getting a PhD at the U of O in music theory.
I actually stayed over at Hal's condo a couple times, as we played several of his pieces in the Octava Chamber Orchestra. Uh-huh. And so we made friends with him and stuff. And I should send him an email. Hopefully he's still alive, because I know he's up there.
I haven't heard that he passed away. I assume my wife gets the ledger notes from U of O, and they have obituaries if a faculty member has passed away. I haven't seen anything about
that. That's good to know.
Yeah,
because I know he's in his 80s, but he also was like bike riding when he was like 82 years old.
So he used to ride his bike past our house. Yeah, I see him in the neighborhood.
Yeah, he's a neat guy. And his music, I don't know if you know it very well, but it's, from what I just can discover, he took a lot of ancient sort of early music ideas, melodic ideas, or I guess more like rhythmic gestures, and then he would use a more modern harmonic language to it. But that was kind of his style that of course, because he really loved early music, like Baroque music and also Renaissance and stuff like that.
It's probably evident in his counterpoint book. Yeah.
Yeah.
And certainly his teaching of counterpoint.
Yeah.
I didn't get to know him that well. Just when I first moved to Eugene, he was hospitable and invited us to his house, and we chatted.
Yeah.
Then I used to see him around occasionally. After he retired, it seems like he's kept a low profile. I don't hear much about him. I don't know that he gets performed that much.
He does. Well, he's a smart composer, and where like the moment he starts writing a piece, and this is what I do too, I immediately start figuring out where is this going to be performed, and I'm like already recruiting people to do it. So I've already got the performance in my brain starting to happen. So by the time I'm done, it's going to be performed and recorded somewhere. You know, that's a really pragmatic way to do it, rather than write a piece and then hope that somebody will play it someday.
That's been my problem all the years. I never think of who's going to perform. I just write the music, and then I look for someone.
Okay.
I consequently have a lot of scores on the shelf that have never been performed, including my dissertation, which is a 90-minute string quartet. I thought it was one of my best pieces. It's never
really.
Yeah.
How hard is it?
It's hard.
Okay.
In fact, I've thought of revising it if I ever get back to it, because I think there's some passages that are almost impossible to play. It goes way too high for the violins. There's some parts that are just the upper register's ridiculous.
Well, I mean, I have to see it, but I mean, it's okay to write lots of ledger lines for violins. Like, of course, Prokofiev writes stuff that goes way up there.
Well, I was using the etudes by what's the name of the Paganini.
Oh, yeah.
And I noticed that one of them does reach the highest B on the piano, and I thought, well, okay, so I'll do that too. And then I actually have a passage that goes up to the D flat above. When I asked Ron Blessinger, I said, "Is this possible?" And he looked at the score and said, "Yeah, I think it is." No one's ever.
Yeah, of course. I mean, when Paganini wrote stuff that looks impossible, the legend is that he played it, so he proved it could be played. And also, if he's a violinist, he knew that there was some violinistic way to do it.
Yeah.
So that's that. Of course, now if you go to Strauss, you look at his scores and you're like, this is insane. No orchestra could ever play this. And the only reason that anybody did play it is because he was a conductor and he got his groups to do it. Otherwise, I think it would have all faded into obscurity and never been performed, you know? So it's just...
I love Strauss.
Yeah, so do I. My all-time favorite piece is Death and Transfiguration. I just love that piece. You know,
that I believe that motive turns up in the Metamorphosen. No, the four last songs. He quotes that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an amazing piece. It's also amazing because I think he was in his early 20s when he wrote it. You know, and it's just the subject matter and everything. Like, you hear that piece and you're like, wow, this is just...
And the
masterpiece.
Early chamber works are what kind of sparked my interest in Strauss originally. The Violin Sonata, which I think is one of the greatest chamber works repertoire. Not to mention the piano quartet and the cello sonata. Those three pieces really had a powerful influence on me.
Wow.
And
of course, you know the horn concertos too, right?
Well, yes.
I really dig those too. They're much more classical, but still, I mean, it's definitely Strauss.
I like the late works, the late horn concerto, and the oboe concerto too.
Oh yeah, mm-hmm.
Those late works are just special, very special.
Yeah, Yeah, the great composer. Wow. Yeah, so, well, okay, before we wrap up, we gotta start putting stuff in the description. So I'm gonna put your website for sure, which I believe is GaryNoland.com.
Let's see, Gary Noland composer.com.
Composer.com, yeah, okay.
All one word.
Okay, and then what else should we put down there?
The SoundCloud, my SoundCloud profile has all the new stuff. I haven't put it in my website yet. I mean, there are about maybe 150 pieces I still have to put on the website. I'm way behind. So the SoundCloud is probably the most worthwhile. And then I have a YouTube account, which also has stuff that's not in the SoundCloud. Okay, YouTube channel. Then should we put like your Facebook page and on there, down there too, or? You can, certainly. Even do the Wild Composers. Wild Composers. Oh yeah, of course. I'm the administrator. Right. That's your Facebook group. Yeah. That I've posted in there too. I have so many Facebook groups. It's easy to lose track of them all. I'm a terrible administrator. I don't really do any administrating. I just wanted to found the group just to have a place where I could be free and other people could feel free to put stuff up. Some groups are very restrictive, as you may know, and it's annoying, when they treat you, here you are a composer sharing original stuff. It's not like you're trying to sell insurance, right? And they treat you like just trying to sell insurance. Oh, we don't want you promoting here, Yeah. I mean, it's not. I mean, okay, you're promoting, but you've put your sweat and blood into this music, and you're giving it away for free. You can listen. And it'd be nice if even a handful of people might even bother to listen to it after all the time we put into it. This is another phenomenon I wanted to, if you have a moment, it's observed in the world of Facebook and all the social networks. It seems like the more prolific you are, the more music you have that you're posting, the less per capita people are inclined to listen to it. They start taking it for granted and they just skip over it. If you're a composer who writes one piece a year and you announce it far in advance, okay, I have this this 10-minute chamber work for flute and piano, which I'm working on, I'm struggling, and it's going to be premiered in 6 months. And, you work up a frenzy, and then finally it's premiered, and then everyone's going to listen to it. And then you get, all this attention. But if you're churning out too much music, then no one's that interested anymore. That's a good point. That's actually very true. Well, that gets into that we touched on that a while ago, the business of promoting and marketing yourself. I mean, think of Bach writing a cantata every week. After a while, people probably took it for granted. They thought, just another cantata. Yeah. And didn't he lose about, I think 200 cantatas are lost. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And probably because the paper was used for some mundane purpose. I don't know, lining bird cages or whatever. I mean, they were taken for granted, the Bach cantatas. Oh, there's so many of them. Oh, that crazy Bach, he can't even harmonize a hymn right. You heard that story, right? I'm not sure I have. What's the story? There's a famous story where he got in trouble with the church elders. They dragged him in to the council and they said, Herr Bach, we're very upset with the way that you're harmonizing the hymns. It's very difficult to sing. Can you just do it normal? And so on. Well, I guess there will always be Philistines. Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because, I mean, we equate Bach with the whole Baroque period, right? Yeah. But, I mean, the more you understand that period and the more you dig into his music, you realize he's always doing this really radical stuff, that makes it sound like J.S. Bach. Yeah. But it's because he's just doing this really weird stuff that within somewhat of the confines of what you would expect to be happening in the Baroque era, Yeah. So that's the beauty of it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, then we could talk for another 5 hours on that subject. So yeah, I mean, you can put up my website, and if you want to direct people to where they can order a couple of my CDs, I can send you that information.
Yeah, we can put it all. So would that be on Amazon or?
It's on, yeah, there are 2 CDs now up on Amazon and 3 books of my music.
Great.
And you
Okay.
ordered one of them, I remember. The first
I
volume.
did.
Yeah.
Yep. And are you on TikTok or Instagram?
I've never understood what those are exactly. I don't understand most of these social media networks. I hear about them and then I investigate, and I don't have much patience. And I think, what is this? Is this something worthwhile? Do I want to belong to this?
Well, not if you're a composer. You're already busy enough. And if you have a YouTube channel, then you're like busy for creating content there. So
YouTube's another thing. I used to, in theory, I was monetizing, and now it seems like I can't monetize
oh, really?
videos. I don't understand how that works either.
Because at least by the time I got to that point, there was a certain threshold you had to hit before your channel could be monetized.
There are 1,000 subscribers, I think, and
and then you also needed
44.
I think it was 4,000 hours of watching or something like that.
Per month or what?
No, per year.
Per year. Yeah.
And then, did you hit those milestones?
No, I don't think so. I only have about 550 something subscribers.
Oh, okay. Huh, but I wonder how you were monetized at some point.
In the old days, I think they let anyone monetize, and then
Oh, okay.
they owe me 15 cents. I never saw 15 cents.
Well, that's the thing, of course. I mean, for it to be any amount of money that's worth even sneezing at, you got to have like thousands of subscribers and views and all the stuff.
Are you in SoundCloud?
I am, but I haven't really put much up there, to tell you the truth.
I've looked into getting revenue from SoundCloud, and it started out looking promising. I had just a few pieces. I started back in 2020. I joined, and I paid for the repost, SoundCloud repost. It's about 12 something a month. And so first, after a couple of months, I got $3. And I only have a few pieces. So I put more pieces, and then went up to like $9. Wow, and $13. Then one month it was $28. Wow, if I keep doing this, maybe I'll actually see some real revenue. And then it started going down. The more pieces I put in, now
the less money you got.
I only get $1 a month now.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, the trick is to make money somewhere else.
Yeah.
Then you can actually spend money to promote your art.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know. Well, like I have a few compositions and arrangements I put up on sheetmusicplus.com.
Oh yeah.
And I've sold some. I mean, occasionally there was a couple months where I made like over $50 worth of commissions off stuff like that, and so that's another avenue. But it's all small change, but it's still it's encouraging to think that you actually made a little money off your art.
Initially, I made a little money from Sheet Music Plus, and now they have a policy that you have to make $25, I think, before they send you a check, and they owe me for several scores that have sold in the past few years, but it hasn't reached the $25 threshold yet.
Okay.
I'm still.
Ooh. Well, I'm going to ask you this: are you part of ASCAP?
BMI.
Oh, BMI. Okay, I'm ASCAP. I'm a little ticked at them because, like, our orchestra has to pay a minimum amount every year to ASCAP, and then they're supposedly, and we send them, lists of the concerts we do and the composers that were on it and all this, and they're supposedly keeping track of all that. Well, I know that our orchestra played several of my pieces several years ago, and we sent them all the info, and I still haven't gotten a dime from ASCAP for any of it.
Really?
So something's going on. I mean, I probably would have got like 75 cents or something because it was a small concert, but still, I mean,
my experience with BMI is that they've generally been good about paying. It takes a long time, but the times I've been paid, I've always been pleasantly surprised at the amount that I get for even a small performance. If I have maybe a small chamber work done, 5-minute chamber work, then I might get a check for $300, $400.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot.
And it's not like I get performed all the time, but when I had my concert series, the Seven Species, a number of years ago, I was getting more performances, and I'd send the information to BMI. And my best years, I was actually making $1,500 from royalties from performances. And we're talking about maybe 7 or 8 performances.
Mm-hmm.
So I've generally been pleased with BMI. Their service was always good. I think it's probably not as good as it was. I would call back in the day and the concert music division, and Emily Good, who was in charge, would answer the phone right away. She knew who I was, which always amazed me.
Okay.
She was dealing with thousands of composers, I imagine, but she always knew exactly who I was. And I thought, this is fabulous that they have, they personalize their service. They don't make you wait to talk to someone. Now, the last time I called, they did make me wait. So it's changed. It's not what it used to be.
Maybe you were on the A list.
Yeah, I don't know.
Mr. Noland is calling on line 1.
No, I think they just offered a good service. When I was in New York, going around to the various music organizations, this was years ago, back in the 80s, I found that, BMI was very hospitable, and they welcomed me. They showed me around. The same was true with the composers. What's it called? The Composers Alliance. And then I went somewhere else. These composer organizations in New York were nice. They were nice to composers, and that impressed me.
Yeah, that's a nice change.
Yeah.
Most of the time, as a composer, you feel like you're getting treated like dirt. Get out of here. We want to play Beethoven. We want to play your stuff.
One reason I moved away from Eugene is because I went to the OFAM, the American Festival, Oregon Festival of American Music, which was a relatively new organization in Eugene, and they just showed me the door.
Yeah.
and I thought, well, I don't want to live in Eugene anymore. It wasn't just that organization; it was other, these music institutions in Eugene were like that. They treated you like dirt.
Yep. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay. Well,
it's very good. Okay, so that's all that stuff down there.
And I'm still on to the singer and pianist, which you funded, the recital that was supposed to happen.
Oh, right.
2 years ago. I'm hoping that they'll get their act together soon.
Okay, and then is that the concert that's coming up, or do you have, something else?
Cascadia. That's Cascadia. Did you want the information on that?
Yeah, let's put a link to that too. Where can we send people to that?
Yeah, I can send a link.
Okay, great.
This will probably not be a recital anymore. It's probably just going to be recordings, or maybe a limited recital.
That's fine.
I want to use up the funding I received for that. It wasn't much, but there's funding still, and I want to get that past me. It's just
you could turn it into a nice YouTube video or something to put on your channel or something like that.
I think I sent you 2 YouTube videos that were made from the funding. That was the pianist Mirna Setyawan.
Yeah.
And those were good.
Yeah, those are great.
Fantastic pianist.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Well,
keep you posted.
Very good. It's wonderful getting to know you, and we'll keep in touch. And
if you're in Portland, let me know.
Well, I live in the Seattle area, so Portland isn't really that far away.
Right.
So cool. All right, Gary.
Good to meet you.
Take good care.
You too.
Fantastic creations emerging spontaneously from the space of life. For the benefit of all beings everywhere. We gotta